What is up, double front bicep for my astronauts. In this video we're going to talk about calcium D-glucarate and how that affects your estrogen metabolism, and if it's even a good supplement or not. Is it effective? Because a lot of estrogen metabolizing supplements contain this. So we're going to discuss if it's actually good and if the dosage they're using is effective for the true purpose, and also how calcium D-glucarate will affect not just your estrogen but also your androgens. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, be sure to get my ebook on how to maximize your testosterone naturally. Let's dive in. Okay, so first up, what is calcium D-glucarate? So calcium D-glucarate is a calcium salt of the molecule known as D-glucaric acid, also known as saccharic acid, an endogenously produced acid via glucuronic acid. So it's produced from glucose. So glucose is converted into glucuronic acid. So when you take a supplement, it's basically calcium attached to a glucuronic acid, creating calcium D-glucarate. But you can also find this in potassium D-glucarate. So how calcium D-glucarate works is that calcium and potassium glucarate salts and their metabolites, glucuric acid, promotes liver detoxification via 4 molecular pathways. Namely, it modulates reactive oxygen species production, it modulates deconjugation, apoptosis of hepatocytes, it's liver cells. So I discuss all of these, exactly what it is. And also number 4 is beta-glucuronidase synthesis. This is how it affects detoxification via the liver and also estrogen excretion, or at least toxin excretion. So this is basically what happens. I want to emphasize specifically in this video beta-glucuronidase. So this is the liver. And you have a toxin, which is X right here. And then X, the toxin, is being excreted by the attachment of a glucuronide molecule. That makes it more water soluble and ready for excretion. So then it's excreted via the bile into the intestine. So this is the intestine, right? And then you have this gut microbiota that express beta-glucuronidase, which removes the glucuronide molecule. So this is the toxin without the glucuronide molecule, which is then reabsorbed back into the body and then go back to the liver. So you're basically never getting rid of that toxin because of beta-glucuronidase. And so people use calcium D-glucarate to help with metabolism in the liver, but also to inhibit beta-glucuronidase so you can actually excrete the toxins properly. Now, as I mentioned, there's 4 main ways how calcium D-glucarate can actually affect liver function and improve liver function. So this is a little bit more on the sciencey side, but this one is basically it inhibits reactive oxygen species production. There's 4 main things that basically inhibit liver function so that you can't detoxify, and calcium D-glucarate affects all of those. So this one is reactive oxygen species that cause liver damage and toxin accumulation. This one is endotoxin, so it's basically toxins coming from the gut, also called lipopolysaccharide, which is produced by gram-negative bacteria. So they are glucuronidated, they're conjugated, and this beta-glucuronidase basically activate them, and so you get liver damage from the endotoxin. Number C is inflammation inducing apoptosis, which is just basically cell death in the liver. Number D is you have endotoxin activating the endotoxin receptor, causing inflammation and upregulating beta-glucuronidase. So it's not just bacteria that can express beta-glucuronidase, but it's also various cells that are inflamed that can express beta-glucuronidase. So it's basically reactive oxygen species, endotoxins that's not properly detoxified. Then you have apoptosis, which is cell death, and then you have upregulation of beta-glucuronidase. And then calcium D-glucarate can reduce, as you can see here, reactive oxygen species production. It can reduce the glucuronide deconjugates, so you have less active endotoxin in the body. So it's less endotoxin that's been harming the liver. You can see it's a massive reduction there. Then you have PARP, right? So PARP is basically the enzyme that becomes upregulated when you have DNA damage. So it helps with DNA repair. So if you have too much reactive oxygen species that will damage the DNA, PARP will become upregulated and deplete NAD and cause a lot of issues. So this calcium D-glucarate then inhibits this PARP, basically prevents DNA damage and spares NAD. Then you also have beta-glucuronidase that becomes dramatically downregulated by calcium D-glucarate, right? A massive downregulation. So all of this was just in vitro, and in vitro, certain substances can be extremely potent, as you can see by these graphs. It's really effective at doing what it's supposed to do in vitro. And just as a summary, here you can see again the glucuronic acid prevents the production of reactive oxygen species. It inhibits beta-glucuronidase. You have less active endotoxin. It inhibits apoptosis of the liver cells. And then it also prevents the upregulation of beta-glucuronidase. Right, so that's the summary of what glucuronic acid can do. And when you take, for example, calcium D-glucarate. So how effective is it really when you take it in vivo? So there's unfortunately only animal studies out there and no human studies to back any of this research up. So we don't know how effective in humans it would be. But a single dose of 1.1 gram per kilogram of calcium D-glucarate has been confirmed to inhibit beta-glucuronidase in the lungs, liver, serum, and the intestines. So roughly between 40 and almost 60% in serum, which seems to be quite effective, but you will see the dose is quite high, 1.1 gram per kilogram, right? That's very high. Then there was another animal study looking at 4% of the diet for 2 weeks, showed an inhibitory effect of 54 to 70% in the intestinal tract, and the 2% diet had reduced serum beta-glucuronidase approximately 50%. So the 2% in the diet was only slightly less effective than the 4%. So let's say we will work on the 2%, and I will show the math later on. So in rats given 10% of the diet as calcium D-glucarate, serum estrogen had been noted to be reduced by only 23% relative to control. So 10% was only slightly better than 4%, so 200 milligrams per kilogram, which is the human equivalent dose, will be just as effective. So basically, if you want to reduce estrogen by 23%, you have to take 200 milligrams per kilogram, right? So how effective is it really? So in terms of dosing, 200 milligrams per kilogram for a 100 kilogram guy is 20 grams daily to reduce estrogen by 23%. That does not seem very effective to me. I don't know about you guys. So how effective will 2 gram or 200 milligrams be? Because most supplements only include like 200 milligrams of this supplement, right? So how effective will 200 milligrams really be? Maybe it will support liver function for proper detoxification, but it will not massively upregulate detoxification of any substance because the dose is so low. Right, so I found a few testimonies, and it's actually difficult to find testimonies of people actually doing tests by using this. So this is a few Reddit testimonies. So this guy started taking 200 milligrams 3 times per day with meals. Just started yesterday, so nothing to report. So here he gave an update. And if you can see about the dates, it's about a year later, I guess. My high sensitivity estradiol dropped from 39 to 35, so not significantly. So he was taking 600 milligrams of calcium D-glucarate daily, and his estrogen dropped insignificantly. And you can't even say this is specifically due to the calcium D-glucarate. It could be something else, right? There's a lot of variables that happens in people's lives over a couple of months. Right, so what about other hormones? What about testosterone, DHEA? Will it lower your other hormones as well? Right, some people say like it's very effective at detoxifying estrogen. So basically it's binding to all of the hormones, not just estrogen. So might it also lower your testosterone, for example, right? It's not good. So on the 10% diet of calcium D-glucarate, urinary 17 ketosteroids, which is the collective term for DHEA, androstenedione, androsterone, and estrone, appear to increase approximately 200% following 2 days on the diet, but decrease to 50% after 2 weeks, right? So it dramatically increased the detoxification and then it decreased again, right? The detoxification. So you can basically assume that if you were consuming 10% of your diet from calcium D-glucarate, you might experience a 200% increase in the urinary excretion of 17 ketosteroids, right? So this is some human evidence. So this was a guy, again, read a testimony. Actually, I got it back, his test results. After multiple blood tests since that post, it doesn't lower testosterone at all. I'm still doing 3 grams a day of CGM, which is calcium D-glucarate, with 400 milligrams of DIM. So I think he was injecting testosterone and then taking the CGM on top of that, and it did not affect his testosterone. And I also think that it did not affect his estradiol levels at all. So basically, I think the usual doses of 200 milligrams is really ineffective at enhancing the detoxification of compounds like estrogen or testosterone, as you would see by various testimonies. Maybe some people might feel slightly better, maybe it's placebo, but based on blood tests, actual blood tests, it doesn't really change the actual numbers. And so if you would like to focus on detoxifying compounds, and as I mentioned specifically at the beginning of this video, beta-glucuronidase, if you want to lower beta-glucuronidase, there's better compounds out there, because beta-glucuronidase would prevent you from detoxifying compounds. So once you've excreted them from the liver, beta-glucuronidase would reactivate them, you reabsorb them, so you never get rid of the compound. So ultimately, you want to downregulate beta-glucuronidase. So there's better compounds for doing that out there. So other compounds that can lower beta-glucuronidase would be milk thistle, cardamom, konjac, glucomannan, reishi mushroom, lycopene, bifidobacterium longum, VSL number 3, which is a probiotic combination, apple pectin, and lactoferrin. So I would just maybe pick one or two of these and then add them. So for example, you can add the longum, cardamom, and if you really want to, like lactoferrin, right? So there's 3 of those. And that might have a really good effect at enhancing the excretion of estrogen for you, instead of having to take calcium D-glucarate, which might not even be that effective. So I would rather focus on lowering beta-glucuronidase with these supplements than using calcium D-glucarate. So honestly, I do think that calcium D-glucarate is not effective in the doses that people usually take. Even if they take 1 to 2 grams, it might become more effective, but 200 milligrams is very unlikely to be effective. So if you're using a estrogen supplement, or you're using a testosterone booster that contains only 200 milligrams, chances are that dose is not effective enough. And as you've seen at the top of the video, your body can create glucuronic acid from glucose. So if you eat enough carbohydrates, so like a good starting point might be 100 grams, 200 grams, 300 grams, you can work up, see what you tolerate based. That amount of glucose should be enough to create glucuronic acid, as long as your liver is staying healthy and you're insulin sensitive. That will be enough to create glucuronic acid to help with the excretion of all of the toxins. So maybe treat yourself to some starches, rice or potatoes, some fruits, right? So you can provide some glucose to the body for the production of those specific compounds. Alright guys, I hope this video was helpful. You learned something new, and I will check you in the next one. Cheers guys.